Welcome back. As time goes on, I'm becoming more and more convinced that the only way out of the predicament I find myself in is through the exploitation of the testificate economy. A fact that, as harped on at great length by past Goose, implies that I get to relapse ever further into EA-approved gameplay decisions and hinge the entirety of my progression on loot box mechanics. Fun. While we wait for that particular slot machine to come up sevens, let's try to be as productive as possible in the meantime. Stupendous amounts of starch stuffing has artificially inflated my reputation score into the excellent range. This enables me to request the single most reputation-demanding supply gift in the quest book, an entire flipping nuclear reactor. From the same people that packed the Leadstone energy cell on an interstellar voyage. My brothers, in all things theological, have you people literally never played the game before? Ignoring, for a moment, the legendarily questionable decision-making that went into stocking this ship up, let's talk about nuclear reactors. They are, in a word, terrible. Even the smallest ones require heaps of materials to make, their power output is utterly miserable without massive technological investment into chunk-wide power generation infrastructure, and they consume an ore called yellorium as fuel, meaning they are the perfect intersection of expensive, underpowered, bulky, and unrenewable. This one at least only costs bread, though, and yellorium is pretty useless otherwise, so I might as well milk out as much as I can from it, but really? The presence of my new electric radioactive paperweight, when combined with the 2-to-1 sugar to sugarcane ratio from a pulverizer and a fully matured sugarcane farm, is enough to keep my sugar supplies rolling in. So that means it's time to start transitioning over to a marshmallow-based production economy. Water is free thanks to the Cooking for Blockhead sink, but this transition demands a problematically large amount of eggs. Or, well, it would be problematic for most people, but I'm not most people and happen to think that participating in what I would generously describe as high-octane animal cruelty is both a safe and excellent procedure to implement anytime there's an opportunity to do so. So, I don't think eggs are going to be a problem. Crucible crafting is never a particularly exact science, but my inability to craft goggles of revealing to tell me what all is in there at any given time turns it from an inexact science to a glorious clown show. To try and mitigate some of the nonsense involved in bulk crucible crafting, I used some fluid automation powered by sinks and thermal expansion servos to supply water in bulk, have made sure to cover all sides of the crucible with a flux-proof block, and built the whole thing in an area that is being actively purified of taint just in case of oopsies. Marshmallows, in addition to having a really stupid amount of metallum essentia, also have a large amount of aqua essentia, and rather than let all of that boil off harmlessly, I decide to lob in a bunch of stone as well for terra, and use the leftovers to crank out a bunch of clay. I'm going to need Tinker's smelteries here pretty quick, and Thumbcraft clay production is miles better than thermal expansion. T-Con smeltery access unlocks a handful of relatively useful tech for me. Tool forges let me make lumber axes and hammers, which greatly accelerate mining and woodcutting operations, and the latter is particularly useful because my charcoal consumption rate when plotted on a graph gives the GameStop stock share price a run for its money, and I have zero indication that we will be stopping that increase anytime soon. It also unlocks some unintuitive mod interactions that are worth exploring. Endermen, when melted in a smeltery, produce resonant ender, which can be used for an advanced metal alloy called enderium or casted directly into ender pearls, which themselves have a number of valuable applications. The return rate of pearls per enderman is a wonderful 4-to-1 ratio, which makes this a very profitable way of producing pearls. But the process suffers from the same drawback as farming them the normal way does, in that it kills the enderman. I have precisely one of them and don't feel like sacrificing it to the cause, so I'm going to have to get clever. It is possible to use a smeltery to convert any horse-edible materials into glue by shoveling a horse into the smeltery and feeding it materials to heal it when it takes damage. In fact, I've already done this to produce some glue balls, which the game treats as functionally identical to slime balls. Endermen are a bit trickier because they despawn, they teleport, and they can't eat sugar to heal their lost health, which means I have to add a named name tag, a minecart, and a small mountain of Mine Factory reloaded health syringes into the equation. The syringes only consume apples and restore 5 points of health per use, which effectively means I can now convert 2 apples into 1 ender pearl in an incredibly inconvenient process that absolutely does not cause horrifying third-degree burns to the entirety of my body. Naturally, I bugger this whole thing up and aggro my Enderman, who then brutally murders me before I can shove it out of the smeltery, resulting in it burning to death itself. But I did manage to net about 2 stacks of ender pearls from it, which should be more than enough to last until I get another Enderman spawn egg. As a side note, this came up in the YouTube comments last video, but I decided that the rules of the run prohibit me from ender pearling over to the Greatwood, because that would be throwing an entity into tainted land, which constitutes as intentionally interacting with it. So, no easy way out for me with this one. Which means it's back to stalling. Using an igneous extruder, I'm able to convert buckets of lava directly into obsidian, which I can then throw in a smeltery to produce a weak but hard toolhead that has a diamond mining level. This lets me extract all of the cinnabar and diamond ore that's been bopping around under my base since the start of the game, but I plan on leaving the diamonds in place until I actually need them. It's entirely possible that I will get a fortune enchantment somewhere down the line, and I just have no use for diamond right now. The igneous extruder also produces cobble from nothing, too, so I go ahead and tell it to do that forever. I have no idea what I would need cobble for at the moment, but it's a free action, and I may as well take advantage. More than a few days, way too much Thaumcraft research, and a bowel-bursting amount of bread later, and I eventually stumble upon some good spawn egg luck. I have by now gotten 1 villager egg, which I haven't bothered placing yet, because why? But I also lucked my way into a blaze spawn egg, which is something I didn't know was in the pool until now. Botania is in this pack, and one of the reworks that Botania does is it makes certain mobs shed items related to themselves on a timer. Chickens drop feathers, spiders drop strings, skeletons drop bones, villagers very, very rarely drop emeralds, and blazes drop blaze powder. These powers combined allow me to, for the low price of a hopper and having to tolerate the 1 mob impression of Darth Vader snoring in a kettle drum for the rest of time, produce 1 blaze dust for every 6 minutes and 40 seconds. What a deal! In preparation for the day that I finally get a breeding pair of villagers, let's start construction on their containment and breeding hole. This pack is built on Minecraft 1.7.10 in the grand old days where the strongest aphrodisiac Minecraft had to offer was doors, so my entire villager setup consists of a giant catch trough, a tube, and a breeding pen, surrounded by an inordinately large number of what villagers think are houses, but any sane person immediately concludes is probably one of those weird art installations that small to medium-sized US cities put up in the slums to try and drive up tourism by appearing modern and intellectual, that just inevitably make people wonder why their taxpayer dollars are being spent on glorifying some basement dweller's beer tab collection instead of fixing actual societal problems. About an hour and a half later, according to my blaze powder clock, I get my second villager egg, and now there is nothing for it but to wait. I'm going to need many villagers before anything super interesting can happen with them. And anyone who has watched the first few episodes of my Nothing series will know exactly what my plan is here, but for the rest of you, I will leave it as a surprise. Back to stalling! 5.5 hours of sitting around AFK and doing nothing later, I climb up the ladder to a lovely incestuous mosh pit of testificate suffering. Unlike in New Horizons, which posed upon me the twin chains of extreme poverty and mob cramming, Blightfall has no issues with either of these, so I'm free to engineer to my heart's content. The only real change that I make, though, is that I just up the door cap to make more villagers breed simultaneously, and then shove all the villagers into a smaller space to make it easier for them to find friends. So really the principle behind this design is entirely identical. It's still just a morally bankrupt incestuous mosh pit, just a slightly laggier one. There is an argument to be made that I could automate iron golems with this design as well, but marshmallows have that problem pretty well solved by this point, so I'm content to just let them sit there and hang over the edge. And hoo boy, do those testificates redefine the meaning of the phrase baby boomer, because they are cranking those suckers out fast enough to leave mock diamonds down the tube. Villagers are fantastic. So fantastic that it kind of ruins the mod pack normally, because if you're patient enough, you can tech skip basically everything in the game with them, but I'm tired of farming bread, so to heck with it, let's start snowballing. Villagers sell a lot of stuff that I want. Glowstone for a bunch of random machines, elemental and knowledge shards for everything Thaumcraft, ore berries for ore, I guess, if I cared. I mean, aluminum's still difficult to source in bulk, but you never know, it might come in handy. Zoologists sell safari nets with random mobs in them because we definitely need more EA-inspired gameplay in our Minecraft universe. Librarians sell books, armorsmith villagers sell chainmail that can be turned into steel. It's just kind of a veritable menagerie of potential game breaks. But all of that pales in comparison to the most important trade of all. Profane ones! They do literally the same thing they do in the New Horizons run, we're just rehashing the old tech here. 50% vis capacity, 110% vis cost, replenish themselves automatically at the cost of driving you cripplingly insane. Unlike in New Horizons, though, I can make normal wands here, so why do I care about the things? Well, because I can't actually make normal wands. The traditional progression path for wand crafting is iron-capped stick into gold-capped greatwood stick into silverwood with something. And I have no way of getting greatwood, so that doesn't really work. Silverwood wands require infusion. Infusion altars require a 40 vis crafting recipe, and I can't do that with anything that I have right now. But hey, it would be a shame if we could skip that whole mechanic with pay to win, right? We all know what that means. That's right! Goose spends 3 hours doing a bunch of useless Thaumcraft research to get the single recipe they actually care about. I love playing point-and-click games for hours on end. I hate this mechanic, I hate this mechanic, I hate this mechanic. That's fine though, because I also have other useful stuff to do with my time, such as automate human-ish suffering. You see, the pack has Mine Factory Reloaded, which means it has auto-spawners, and by combining reusable safari nets purchased from villagers, emeralds from the same, netherwort from a seed bag, blaze powder from my caged blade, blaze powder from my caged Darth Vader cosplayer, slime balls from my slightly melted horse, power from the world's lousiest space heater, and XP juice from my brain, I can now duplicate any mob I have a sample of. This is especially relevant with villagers. I could just farm them naturally, but for all of my joking, my villager production speed is not objectively all that fast, and I would much rather not let the game run for hours on end to get more. Botania has a mechanic that makes them drop emeralds passively, but it is really slow, and I need a lot of emeralds. Sure is a shame that I can't just dupe them for basically nothing and cram hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of them into a hole over a hopper to get around that, isn't it? Oh wait. I don't really know how long I spend doing this, but I stop when I get to what I think is about the right amount. And I can tell this because the instant anything with collision gets within collision distance of the villager hole, that happens. Sure, the level of entity cramming in this machine skips right over violating human rights and ends up violating something between logic and the fundamental laws of the universe, but, if I may offer a counterpoint, money. Well, money in a few hours, at least. Until then, it's time to do some legwork. Infusion altars are nowhere near as scuffed to make in regular mod packs as they are in New Horizons, so between that and all of my definitely no side effect having free vis from my naughty wands, cranking one of those out is trivial. While I'm at it, I also make up some basic alchemy stuff. Most of my alchemical crafting is bulk production using cheap junk that I can be wasteful with, so it's just easier to use my patented Goose brand pressure cooker crucible tech, but infusion requires actual vis, so I don't get to cut corners with it. Getting the ingredients for a silverwood rod is trivial. I have mined at least a handful of each type of shard, am sitting on stacks upon stacks of silverwood logs, and Essentia is cheap. But I do run into some issues stabilizing the altar. My go-to option, mob heads, doesn't work because there are no mobs to behead. The same problem precludes using candles, and glowing flowers require botania, so all I can do is spend my first round of emeralds on essence shards and hope that a few crystal clusters are enough to make it work. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be good enough. And as it turns out, I needn't have worried. New Horizons has really messed with my calibration on what normal difficulty feels like, and the infusion doesn't do anything more interesting than sparkle threateningly. It wasn't a terribly unstable recipe, to be fair, but the amount of easy wins I'm being handed still feels weird. Thaumium wand caps require essentia I don't have, but gold wand caps are trivially easy to crank out. Unfortunately, my wand of infinite naughty words has run out of juice, which means I either get to figure out how to recharge it, or, just buy another one. I opt for the second option and spend a diamond, some wood, and an emerald block on a trade station, which lets me view all villager trades in an area simultaneously. This is the first diamond used in the series, by the way, so that should really tell you what my priorities are right now. It also should go without saying, but warp is not a problem in this mod pack, and if anything, it's useful and I actually want more of it to unlock the Eldritch tech tree. All of this junk enables me to finally get my wand, but there's a little problem. How do I fill it? I have a couple of nodes from Silverwood trees that I can tap, but they don't have the right aspects. Primal Charms technically could do it eventually, but they're slow, and I don't have very many shards at the moment, so that leaves only one reasonable way. And that way is lots and lots of murder! No, seriously, so much murder. Mobs drop blobs of raw vis that can be sucked up by a wand. Those vis types are determined by the scanning value of a mob, though, and wouldn't you know it, but villagers are an excellent source of all 6 aspects in roughly equal quantities. Wow, they really are good for everything, aren't they? Avert your eyes, kids. Goose needs to go do some spring cleaning in the villager pen with an axe. So great, my wand can now be reliably charged with the magical power of war crimes. Why? Because my time is running out, and the taint has begun encroaching on my territory to the northwest. I'm not sure how far it will spread, but it has already started eating into my base, and it seems to be accelerating despite this supposedly being impossible, so yeah. So far, all it's eaten is a bit of my vegetable farm, but I have no idea where it will stop, and it shouldn't be doing this at all, so it's time to get a move on. Until recently, I had precisely 0 ways of producing any sort of purifying option for a lot of reasons, but I will leave the why as an exercise to the viewer. With villagers, this is no longer the case. Silverwood saplings can be crafted via infusion. It is flabbergastingly expensive and inefficient, but the last hard limit on the process was my inability to produce Aurum Essentia, which is now removed, because I can produce sanity salts from villagers to the tune of several hundred emeralds per node. Ouch. Thankfully, this whole exercise is something of a moot point though, because I don't actually need to produce new purifying options at all. I can just move them. Yeah. It's kinda anticlimactic, but it turns out that you can just tech skip Greatwood entirely, and with my new Silverwood wand, I have the ability to jar and move pure nodes. It does not make them very happy, but their purification effect has nothing to do with their health or strength, and I don't plan on using them for normal node reasons anyway, so it doesn't really matter. The only drawback with them is that they're slow, which doesn't even make the first page of problems I need to engineer my way out of on this run, so who cares? Great! Next problem. Villagers may drop all 6 kinds of vis when they, contribute to the cause, but they don't drop very much, so I either need an entirely new way of producing good mobs to do this with, more Yellorium to burn, or a better way of just recharging my wand normally. I would love to say that the solution to this problem is a deep and intricate and complicated process that requires a ton of clever engineering, but no, actually, the pack authors just fell prey to the vanilla blind spot. Coal in a pulverizer makes sulfur, sandstone in a pulverizer makes niter, those 2 plus charcoal makes gunpowder, which I can dupe with Thaumcraft, and gunpowder plus sand equals TNT. I continue to solve all of my problems with the proper application of high explosives, and lo and behold, 1 Yellorium ore compatible mining tier skip. This works on any ore in the game. If you don't feel like wasting a bunch of ore, you can also just use golems or an excavation focus. Or just make void metal, which would have been way easier, but it's also less funny, and I completely forgot about it until the end of the episode, so who cares. Incidentally, taint. It's starting to spread pretty bad down here. I can kind of hold it back by breaking the fibrous taint that hasn't spawned in a tainted biome underneath it yet, but that isn't gonna last forever, and I can't afford to devote the attention to it. While my two pure nodes are doing their bridgy thing, I occupy myself with other pursuits, and for once I actually have something meaningful to do while twiddling my thumbs. Infinite free villager trades can be leveraged to do a wide assortment of potentially useful things, from purchasing bulk quantities of elemental and knowledge charts to enabling thumbcraft progression to pursuing entirely new mobs. Zoologist villagers sell a special type of safari net that can contain a random mob, and while like the jaded loot bags, most of them are passive, a fair few of them are not, which allows me to pick up a sample of creepers and ocelots for further replication. Of course, I immediately then reel up some fish, tame the ocelot, and name it Schrodinger. Obviously, I shouldn't even have to explain this part. Schrodinger's coloration does come out wrong, but I'd like to think that their whole ability to embody any cat in any Minecraft world ever thing kind of fits pretty well given their name, so we'll ignore it. An entire Thaumnomicon's worth of research later, and believe me, I wish I was joking about that, and I am now the proud owner of this. A twisty, winding, turbo-scuffed tentacle of purified land connecting Biodome Omega to the Greatwood Treehouse POI. I have precisely one goal here, and that is to loot the place to the ground. So let's start with the obvious stuff. Greatwood and Greatwood saplings are a given, and the two of those alone gate somewhere around 20 different crafting recipes, including stuff like warded glass thaumatorium centrifuges, crystallizers, and Greatwood wands, the last of which are admittedly kind of obsolete. This place isn't just a tree, though, it's a point of interest, which means it has all sorts of other things worth stealing, like a couple of levitators, a couple of silverwood saplings, a bunch of furniture that can be scanned, a whole heap of pure daisies, which are a thing from Britannia, but also have a minor purification effect that I will be exploiting incidentally throughout the run. The cream of the crop when it comes to lootable items, though, is a copy of the Crimson Rites, which I need for Thaumcraft progression. And that was just the obvious stuff. Grass blocks can be hoed to produce wheat and cotton seeds, and will let me make sheep farms that don't require me to breed the sheep every time I need wool. A couple of tainted mobs volunteered to join my mob collection too, and while there is an argument to be made that me existing in the area that I was in resulted in the mobs entering an untainted area and let me capture them, the interaction was literally unavoidable, so I'm just gonna put it in the same category as rendering tainted land, call it mechanically unavoidable interaction and not deliberately exploit it. The biggest prize of all, though, was a sinister node. Like a pure node, sinister nodes transform the terrain around them, making them a viable option for taint clearing if I ever mess up so bad that I lose literally everything else I own and have no other option. Unlike a pure node, though, sinister nodes transform the terrain into an eerie biome and have a fun new secondary effect that I am highly interested in exploiting. They spawn zombies. Brainy zombies, to be specific, and for some reason staring really intensely at 5-head undead monsters is required to unlock research in Thaumcraft, so gaming. And you know what that means? It's time for some classic balanced Thaumcraft, or CBT for short. Did you know that Automagy has an entire branch of research dedicated to making an item logistics system that I have literally never once found a use for in 10 years of playing these mod packs? 'Cause I sure do in agonizing detail. Yes, please, allow me to stare intently at some crystal brains. I, too, do sure anticipate a deep, throbbing need to make a remote recharge system for a terrible flight suit that I will never use. Why, yes, I would like to research how to make every single kind of upgrade individually. How kind of you to ask. Completing my research is only possible because of the incredible flexibility of auto-spawners. With the make identical copies of this mob mode enabled, I am able to replicate villagers with the exact set of trades that the one in the net has. So what I did was I farmed out a villager that sells knowledge shards for both books and emeralds, and then put a pipe in my head to supply the thing with the tidal wave of mob essence that it consumes. It has not been pretty, at all, but I have been able to brute force research to the point where I'm now fishing for spare research trees with knowledge shards, so I'm really close to breaking through into Kami. Oh look, there it is now. With all my research completed and actual long-term progression possible thanks to the ownership of a way of purifying blight that does not take a literal eternity, let's start playing the game, yeah? I'm going to need to start traveling long distances through tainted areas. My old method of moving nodes is technically effective at scale, but there is also only so much reading material in the world, and I'm going to need to save a little bit of it for my next Nothing episode, so let's maybe find a faster option. Conveniently, my full clear of the Thaumcraft research tree turned up a couple of candidates, and the one I select is Silverwood Potions. They are cheap and renewable if you ignore what a pain in the glass making and shearing silverwood saplings is, and you can spam the ever-loving daylights out of the things to carve your way to wherever you're going. The only drawback is the bisque cost, which, you're kidding, right? Profane wands go burr. I'm so crazy at this point that it's literally impossible for me to make it worse, so why on earth should I care about warp? While I set out on my epic journey, let's talk logistics. These potions aren't really all that good at purifying much of anything. They have a decent splash zone, but the taint tends to come back really quickly if I use them in an area that's regularly rendered, which, kind of includes my base, so that means their direct utility is pretty limited. Instead of trying to stably purify an area with them, I'm going to use them to make one-way trips to other teleporter locations to unlock them. The goal here is expansion to other potentially useful areas of the map, not sustained taint clearing ability. This raises a second problem, though, which is that actually surviving the trip is going to be a bit tricky. Tainted mobs hit hard and have a ton of health, and I can't really use ranged attacks on them because, for the most part, they will be approaching me from inside of tainted land. This means I will either have to kite them back into purified areas to whittle them down, assuming I even can, which is not super safe. Instead of doing that, I'm going to travel via water. The oceans are mostly mob-free since there's nothing that they can spawn on, and taint will be forced to spread through underground caves instead of surface biomes, which means I might be able to keep the purified areas taint-free for a little bit longer. With all that in mind, I plan my first expansion to head due south into a river delta, and then we'll follow the river delta south into a biodome. This will give me decent map coverage without putting me at any real risk of mob ganking until the very end of the trip. Or that's the plan, at least. As with any plan, it does not survive first contact with the enemy, and in this case the enemy is my own brain, because I am crazy enough to spawn my own mobs and am almost immediately ganked by a bunch of goth Harry Potter cosplayers. Charming! The runback also exemplifies my problem with these potions. I did not even have this thing rendered for a minute, and it is already almost impassable. These potions are very much a one-way trip. My second attempt goes off much smoother, and about 10 minutes of sneaking and potion spamming my way across the ocean sees me within sight of Biodome Delta. It also turns out I needn't have worried about hostile mobs. The splash potions heal them on contact, which means I can basically just potion spam my way anywhere that I need. And I secure the biodome without any issues. I even have enough spare potions to take a little detour to the tiny ship POI, which nets me another teleport point, a bunch of silverwood that I can grow and buzz cut later for some leaves, some shimmer leaf, some ether blooms, and a free grass block to do something with. I would say that this was a quite successful containment breach, if it hadn't been for the price tag. 4 stacks of silverwood potions. Youch. Well, alright, if it's gonna be that easy, let's do it again. My next path bounces me up north-northwest towards a tundra cave POI, and then from there I have an option to bounce west-southwest towards Biodome Gamma, depending on how my purification potion supply holds. I was also smart this time, and brought a bunch of safari nets to try and capture the various tainted mobs for potential farming purposes later. This was met with limited success. I was able to secure a tainticle, a tainted sheep, and crawlers, but in doing so discovered that the crawler balls can't be safari netted and that the taint-specific mobs can't be dealt with using potions. Which makes sense, I guess, and it's fine for now since I'm still traveling through open areas, but that's going to present a serious issue when I start encountering taint swarms. The Tundra Cave POI nets me a few more blooms, some fancy Botania flowers, and what the game thinks is an incomprehensible alien grimoire, but is actually a perfectly normal Botania reference textbook. Ironically, translating this is entirely optional if you know what you're doing, and I do, so I guess it will remain forever a mystery to the idiot NPCs. The flowers are unfortunately one of the more useless varieties, but if nothing else it saved me from having to come grab them later, and I have more than enough potions to make my way over to Biodome Gamma for pickup, so there's no harm done. Well, I say no harm has been done. That is a lie. There has been quite a lot of harm done to my delicate, fragile little meat body, courtesy of the many various and sundry individuals who seem to have nothing better to do with their lives than spread me around in a fine patina of slightly warped giblets over 3 differing counties. That is to say, mobs hurt, and I need to do something about it. With Icorium armor not happening for the foreseeable future, my next best bet is going to be Void Thaumaturge. And since I needed a fairly aggressive whack of Void Metal anyway, I opt to make a stack of the stuff first by throwing the entirely normal set of things into a Crucible. You know, usual stuff. Wheat seeds, mushrooms, wooden bowls, marshmallows, reusable safari nets. Yeah. Thaumatoriums are for noobs and rich people. Logic and traditional crafting paradigms are for people who want to spend 3 hours waiting on their alchemical furnaces to smelt. I am neither of the three. Armor crafting is trivial with my recently upgraded altar. This is Thaumcraft 4, so stability issues are entirely solvable by surrounding the altar with a large number of the severed heads of my enemies, purchased from my friendly neighborhood human rights violation downstairs. On a note entirely unrelated to current events regarding an alleged violation of contract law, I sure love how Minecraft is so safe and child-appropriate, don't you? Thanks for taking so many proactive and not at all financially motivated decisions to stick up for the kids, Mojang. This is a routine procedure that goes off without a hitch, except for that one little frame where the infusion altar suddenly poops itself and the entire world turns to lightning. It doesn't ever do this again, but I suspect it had something to do with a random instability event that had to individually electrocute several thousand villagers simultaneously, but I like to think it was just the game's way of telling me how happy it is with what I'm doing to it. Enchanting my gear is possible at this point, but it's inconvenient because the only way I have of doing it requires infusion. I can't be bothered for the most part, but I will make one exception for a sword. There is a very special enchantment in this game called Capitalism. Like Endermen and Enderpearls, villagers can be rendered down into the smeltery to produce emeralds, but the conversion rate is not great. Capitalism is a far more efficient process that allows me to quickly extract all of the material value out of a villager in one quick and mostly painless operation. I'm going to need to be doing quite a lot of that here in a bit, but to figure out why, you're going to have to stick around for the next episode. The obligatory simping for YouTube buttons goes here. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed.